ultimately it's all about being a performer and connecting with people and, and serving that role.
Hello and welcome to Where the Living Room Used to Be, a podcast about Rhode Island's music scene. Hey everyone, it's James. In this interview, Bill Bartholomew illuminates the life of a full-time artist, how being a podcaster has informed his music, and he tells the story from one of the most important days in his career. We also chat about his new EP, Bats, which is out digitally on June 11th, and got to discuss how this particular record was made and what he's striving for with the release. So as always, I hope you enjoy the conversation. Please subscribe wherever you're listening right now, as I'll be putting out some mini episodes with Bill over the coming weeks. And follow Where the Living Room Used to Be on Instagram using the handle @LivingRoomUTB to see some flyers, show photos, and a whole bunch more from Bill's time in music. Bill Bartholomew, thank you for jumping on my podcast, Where the Living Room Used to Be. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing with Bartholomewtown, and we can kind of get into that stuff. But, you know, we're going to focus on your music history as it's connected to Rhode Island. And it's a pleasure to have you on.
Well, this is awesome. I mean, this is great because I'm such a big fan of your show as well and of you. And this is great. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, excellent. You know, as we usually do, we'll kind of start with where you grew up. I know that you're South County guy, right? Charlestown, right? Is that where you grew up?
Exactly. Yeah, I grew up in Charlestown and in the woods, you know what I mean? Kind of just basically my sister and I and my cousin across the street. Not a lot of social interaction for most of my childhood, really even into high school. You know, I had people in my life, but I was pretty isolated. I was kind of more engaged with the environment as a whole and kind of being in my own head, which mattered, you know, and I'd always get the Providence Phoenix up at Rippy's Liquor Mart on Route 2, WRIU and BRU. And those are sort of my early portals to the outside world, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay.
And music was something that was definitely always a part of my life, but you know, my parents, especially my mom, really, you know, kind of censored what I could get if I was able to get to Newbury Comics. It took me a while to be able to really, with permission, listen to even WBRU. And
oh, really?
Yeah. So a lot of the music that I originally grew up with was kind of like the adult album alternative, WSNE type of stuff, and a lot of Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I think both of those areas actually do play kind of a big role in the sounds and melodies that I started to get really interested in. Yeah.
Well, when did you start playing music, and what was the first instrument that you played? Was it guitar, or were you learning something prior to that?
Well, I had like a yard sale guitar kicking around, and you know, I remember getting like the Casio keyboards for Christmas, things like that. So, you know, I'd play a drum beat and start to kind of mess around as early as I think sixth grade or somewhere in that range. But my first instrument was actually drums. And
oh, really? Okay.
So I was very lucky that I started with a snare drum and got in seventh grade. I joined the Charahoe middle school band, and they had to pull strings to get me in there and work my schedule all wacky and everything to allow me to join the band, and started studying drums privately as well at that time. And I loved it. And I just started to identify very quickly. I was like, oh, this is who I am. For the first time, I really feel like I have a legitimate identity behind the kit, drumming to songs on the radio, and then even starting to kind of sing and play drums and write these really crazy, they're not even songs, concepts that no one else could possibly want to hear. But yeah, so I started on drums, and then I got an electric guitar a few years later, and I had a group of friends that we all loved music. No one really played a rock band instrument except for me. I had played drums. But we said at some like school dance or something, we're like, oh man, this sucks. Like, let's start a band. You know what I mean? Let's start a band. And we started this band, Acid Rain Revival. I played guitar and sang, and there were upwards at times of 6 of us.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
we just all worked our way through the Neil Young catalog and the Beatles catalog and like all these like very basic singer-songwriter type of artists, and then start to write crazy songs about our teachers and our classmates. You know, I started using a megaphone on stage, and it became this. When I think back, and even when I hear it back, I'm like, wow, this is so interesting, because emo was so huge at that point in time. And we were playing a lot of YMCAs or even venues alongside some of the emo and like hardcore and punk bands of the time. And really taking that aesthetic, making patches and going in a way there. But we were still kind of these like nerds that barely knew how to play our instruments. Like half the guys on the team were like varsity athletes. It was just this really odd group of people. But we ended up playing together for 6 years, living together through college. And Acid Rain Revival, you know, we recorded 2 full-length records and just made the rounds of all the Providence venues, the station, of course, the living room, the Century Lounge, the Met, Ocean Mist. And we just became this South County weird thing. 3 guitars. We had a bongo player at one point. I mean, it's just, but it wasn't jam music. It was like alternative music. So it's just really interesting.
Yeah. And what were the years that the bands were active?
That band started in 2001. 2000, actually. We recorded our first record in 2001 and really made it to like 2005. We played, I think, very sparingly in 2006. By then, I had started to transition to another genre and new creative collaborators. Really through this, my best musical friend and someone I love dearly and played now for 20 years with, Chris Knott. Great Rhode Island music educator, songwriter, performer. And he and I met and started another band called Commas that he played drums and I would play guitar, and then we'd swap off. And we ended up putting a band around that of auxiliary players and played some shows, did a lot of shows with Without Andy, an awesome indie band from Rhode Island at the time. And then realized after we all had kind of graduated college in 2006, we were like, we got to get the hell out of here. And we moved to Brooklyn. The 5 of us, everyone quit their job, et cetera, and just packed up and moved to a loft in Brooklyn in 2006.
Yeah. And I mean, I know obviously the focus here is on Rhode Island, but you know, it'd be remiss to talk about just what living in Brooklyn, you were there for about 10 years. Yeah. You know, what was that experience like for you? You were in Bushwick, living in lofts and this artist community. And I mean, it seems that it's just an extremely, I mean, obviously that's where Silverteeth started, and we'll kind of get with that as well. But like, what was that experience like for you and just the development as an artist being in Brooklyn?
Wow. I don't know how to even put it into words, what happened there. You know, it was so real that I sometimes have to really check to make sure everything that I believe happened really did happen. You know, it was so surreal, and it actually is the more appropriate word. But you know, when I first got there, I had a day job and I was super shy. I'm definitely, a lot of people think, oh, this guy is like yelling and screaming on podcasts and all this stuff. So he must be like I'm definitely an introvert and shy and so forth. So it was really hard for me at first to adapt to the new environment. But Commas broke up after like a year, not even. Most of the guys most of the guys moved back.
Oh, like after the move there, right? Because you were a band for a while, right? And
correct, because we started that in 2004 and we made it to like 2007. So it was like a 3-year run. But the band dissolved and I started to realize that I needed to and kind of wanted to become like a solo artist. Yeah. And through that experience in Brooklyn, Bushwick, Williamsburg, I started to write every day. I'd come home from work and I'd come to my little tiny like doghouse room in this loft and, and play an imaginary set. It's
Really?
something I do to this day still. And it helps me write. I say, what's missing from this set? What's wrong with the order? What's wrong with the this, that, and the other? And so I started to do that and started to put together kind of a new version of myself as a solo artist. And I took that to these cafes, particularly this one cafe, Potion Cafe, that was in the loft building that I lived in, on 248 McKibben Street in Bushwick, and started to finally go meet people and say hi, or just sit there and be like, oh, who's this? Like this clown sitting around, you know what I mean? Like whatever it was. But slowly but surely, we started having open mic there. I used that open mic, which it totally changed my life. Candlelit, no PA, people from all over the world, songwriters, poets, hip hop or folk or punk or whatever you can imagine. And through that process, the competition that it created between people, because you wanted to break ground every Monday night when we did this. You wanted to be better than you were the previous week, but it also formed this family type of scenario. And through that Potion Cafe experience, some of the most important relationships I've ever had came through it. My music shifted into a whole new direction. I quit my job and started living on temp jobs or random stuff or refereeing soccer or the gig here, the gig there, and just became full on, just went full in, and just lived that life playing DIY venues, playing legitimate venues in New York, eventually touring the country, and started and eventually met this amazing group of musicians, John Spiegler, great bass player, Dave Clem, an amazing guitar player, and Keith Robinson, an amazing drummer, and formed a permanent band to basically back me up and make a run, which we made a run at it for a few years. A lot of touring, a lot of business activity, all that nonsense. But it changed my life in ways I couldn't imagine how I could possibly do, no matter what other scenario I could put myself in. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I've thought about any number of bands that have made it out of Rhode Island and have had success. And would I trade places with any of them and have more popularity or anything like that in exchange for the experience I went through at these loft buildings in Brooklyn? And I would never do that. I don't think I could justify it.
Yeah. And the touring was under your name, under the like Bill Bartholomew name, is what you were talking about with that particular era of shows. Yeah,
we were performing as Bartholomew.
Okay.
Was, the guitar player's wife came up with. She was a former major label executive, and so there was a lot of input coming from those guys. Were heavy hitters. I mean, they had already been in groups that had that enormous success commercially and in the indie sense, signed major deals. So I was in this environment where I was the kid, 24 years old, with the songs and with this following of punks and hipsters and people living in Brooklyn. And that was the impetus, and a physical space, because I also had a DIY venue at one point that I was a 1/4 owner operator, and then was throwing my own shows in these lofts. So I was the promoter, I was the guy with the PA system, then the van, and it just created this environment that we were able to kind of, through this Bartholomew period, balance both like, okay, well, we want to be a major label successful band, but at the same time, I kind of want to throw this projector into the crowd at the end of the song. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I will have blood on my hands from something that occurred during the show. So we're balancing both sides.
Yeah. But you had mentioned there was like a shift in the sound, but like I guess before we even kind of moved, like with the band Commas, like what was that sound like, and what was that band like? Like how would you describe that, and what was that community that you were with, and that relationship with the other members?
Wow, that was a combination of experimental and trying to outdo ourselves almost to a detriment in terms of shock value or whatever. But it was very songwriter oriented. Chris and I, really all of us, became. I mean, this is like 2004 and 5. So Wilco, you've got still fresh Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. You've got A Ghost Is Born that just came out. Everything in that world, Shins, Iron and Wine, Broken Social Scene. That whole thing was happening. At the same time, we loved Neil Young and Crazy Horse. I love Mike Patton, and even heavier music. We're playing these lofts and playing with bands like the Viennagram before we moved to Providence, and before we moved to Brooklyn. So we're playing these shows with these like highly experimental bands. So we really went out of our way to be as creative and extreme as possible. The switching back and forth between drums. When Chris was performing a song, he was on guitar and I was on drums, and vice versa. And the auxiliary players moved around between keyboards, guitars, and bass, xylophone, and just trying to create something that was really inspired by the moment in time there. That was a real big moment for indie rock, as you know, is like that 2004. Somebody recently told me, it was when Float On, the Modest Mouse song, became like a pop hit. That the genre changed, and it became less of an escape for us, that we would go to WRIU or the record store, and kind of have our own world. And it became pop music. Indie became something that some guy who works at the place where you're temping, that's like went to Rutgers or something like that. Now he's into it, and he's at the law. So you had this blend, and so Commas really tried to serve that moment in time, I think. And I'm very proud of what we learned. I think we could have done something even more spectacular if we'd had the a little bit more stamina. And we came close, I think, to like really finding a zone that could have been that next level.
I'm to blame. It's me, I swear it, that's they're coursing through your veins and exit slowly in the form calculated scars alone. I'm losing you every time I look into your eyes.
After Commas had ended, World on a Wire was in ostensibly Sony studios. My friends had just left their Sony and were producers there, Grammy winners, and they bought Sony Studio C and moved it to their own place. And I was like their first client, and they're new. So we spent 2 weeks, life-changing relationship with a producer, relationship with Pro Tools, understanding. I learned about how to really make something happen in the studio during that process. And then Wild Colors was the follow-up, which had, to me, it was more of it could have had a better result had we gone back to the studio. I tried to do it on my own at that point, and it was, I worked with this great producer, Rob Gariglia, but it was still a home recording. But those two records, the Delhi magazine gave a lot of really positive reviews to, which at the time especially was a really relevant publication. And that helped get me into a position where where I could be reasonably connected with these sort of higher up on the rank of the musical ranking guys that became Bartholomew.
Okay. So who was performing on those EPs? Was that all of you? Because I know obviously you're playing drums and guitar and producing now. Or who else was on those recordings?
Yeah, Chris Knott played guitar, drums on the first record. I had a hired gun. This guy Keith McCrae, who was like a gospel drummer, playing the second one. Yeah, and it was a hodgepodge of friends and hired guns. With me doing all the guitars and another major collaborator of mine, Quentin Gelderman, who played in Acid Rain Revival on bongos. he came back into my life musically at that point, so that you'll hear throughout these records percussion, bongos, djembe, all this kind of like crazy stuff that makes no sense almost with the songs, but we put in there, and it gave it this like very specific identity.
Yeah.
Especially on stage, the energy. At one point I had an extra percussionist. So I had drums and 2 percussion players on stage with just bass and guitar. So like 3 guys just hammering it. And these like
rules.
Yeah, it was crazy. And it never, ever translated in recording. We could never, that's a huge regret of mine. Is like, if we were better, like if I was better, we could have tried to record that music live. And I think you would then have something much more representative of what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, from seeing you and knowing you, but even just reading reviews, that you as a performer is a key piece to your music, that you are just known for your stage performance and your, everything that you put into it. So yes, it can obviously be a tricky thing of moving that visual experience to an audio one.
Yeah. And it's, and that's so interesting, because that's exactly how I see myself now. I think I've gotten to a point where today, in all the things I do, I'm a performer. At the end of the day, I don't think I'm the greatest songwriter ever, or definitely not the greatest guitarist or musician or whatever. I mean, I think I've gotten something out of all those things, and I have something to share that's worth people's time. But that ultimately, it's all about being a performer and connecting with people and serving that role.
Yeah. But I mean, just as a quick, I want to get into it deeper with what you're doing in media and podcasting and as a journalist and you're on PBS, you're on WPRO and radio and everything like that. Like, you are making this incredible impact with what you're doing, and you're connecting with people in a very, very meaningful way. Even just for me personally, like I see your podcast as an incredible resource for me, as just being an informed voter. I live in Providence, an informed voter here in Rhode Island, so, do you see like a broadening of your purpose away from just music, but like what you're doing and communicating and connecting with people in a, political way and social justice way and everything that you're doing?
Yeah, I do now. I really do. And when I really think about it, and I go back to my life, even in middle school or something like that, I cared about civics and history and music. When I was in high school, I was in AP history and was like in joke classes for every other, most of the other topics. In college, I cared about political science, journalism, and history. And more than anything, when I was in Brooklyn, I became part of that whole movement in those cafes and DIY venues, and meeting people from all over the world was this nonstop conversation and digging into Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn and those kind of generic names, but then going super deep into like the anarchist zines and also one of the most important days of my career, I think, was one of those open mics we were having, and it was right as Obama was rising. And I had like painted this American flag with a cross on it and wrote, "Yes, we can," kind of suggesting like Obama still is carrying the Christian right with him or something like that, whatever. So it was like turned into this whole conversation. And this kid stood up, and I remember he had red hair. He was wearing an LL Bean fleece, and he was from New Hampshire. I'd never seen him before. And he got up on the stage and he gave an impassioned presentation about why Ron Paul was the answer and libertarianism was the answer to all of our woes. And here I am in this like loft with everyone thinking very, very progressively, way, every gender representation, continent, experience level. I mean, you name it. This is the world we have here. And very much so progressive, and if not further than that, in terms of where everyone was thinking. But to hear someone logically lay out an opposing viewpoint and create this debate where people were yelling and it turned into this very lively debate was such a critical moment. And it came from that same stage that the AKA Potion Cafe, as it was officially known, that I'd also found myself as an artist. And it made me realize, wow, you know, that's something that is really missing. Do I agree with everything this guy's saying? Definitely not. But at the same time, this guy's not a moron. And maybe I'm not exactly right about everything I'm thinking about here.
But yeah, I mean, kind of circling back to music, you know, in Brooklyn, you know, as we mentioned, that's where Silverteeth started, which, you know, probably some people that do know that you play music in addition to what else you're doing are probably more familiar with that band name. But yeah, can you talk about the start of that band and you know, what that's all about?
Yeah. You know, with the Bartholomew outlet, it was, or outfit, it was an outlet as well, but you know, we were having a lot of good things happen in the DIY independent world, touring, getting decent press. And I was proud of the songs and the process. I had a studio in Brooklyn that was, we literally meet there every day of the week, 10 o'clock in the morning, meet up, work on songs, work on Pro Tool sessions, make videos, send stuff out to the media, full 9-to-5 job. And then I'd go referee soccer games at night or do some other stupid drive a delivery truck or whatever to like pay just enough to like, and I was sleeping in the studio as well. So I had a bed in my practice space studio, and I just got super burnt out, and we weren't getting the return on investment that we wanted to get from like placements and, you know, people promising, you know, I think at one point we had a meeting with like Apple Music, and they're like, oh, you're going to be like our featured artist for the month of June or something, and we're going to give you a big push. And it just, nothing in that world really ever happened.
I fell asleep under Manhattan stars. When I awoke, I was in your arms. Always in your arms.
We decided, Dave Clem and I, my guitar player from there, started this group called the Golden Age of Transit, in which we just recorded these wacky songs, and in the studio, no expectation of commercial success, just the two of us. I would play a kick drum and a snare drum only. The kick drum both hit with mallets, so right hand kick drum, left hand snare drum. Wow. Overdub that, super sloppy. And, you know, I remember crying, both of us crying during the making of this music, because it was such a release of this intense experience of being in this Bartholomew project. And concurrent with this, the loft building started to change. A lot of the venues started to turn into cafes, and now you got some guy in a Corona cowboy hat playing cornhole or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like, things started to shift. The people started to move away, get priced out, move further and further down the train away from Williamsburg. Whole Foods is here. All that was happening. And so we did this Golden Age project, which was more of a studio effort. But with that, Gabriella Rossi, who at the time I was dating, great singer, visual artist, performer, who had moved into my loft that I was living in Brooklyn from Brazil, and had these big dreams. She started to sing with the Golden Age, and as the Golden Age faded away, I found myself not sure of what I was going to do, and I started to book myself as solo, Bill Bartholomew, and I got a couple of good tours. I opened up for this great band, Streets of Laredo, that eventually signed to like the Strokes manager and like a major label deal, and Bird Courage, another awesome band that really did very, very well in Brooklyn. So I started to have things going as a solo artist, but wasn't making any money. So I started busking on the train platforms. And
all right.
I realized that when Gabriella and I went down together, rather than just me there, who's this white kid with long hair, wearing like a cowboy shirt, she and I would go down there and we'd make money. Singing songs like Jackson, like country songs.
Yeah.
Like traditional country songs, but in this punk Brooklyn sort of way.
Yeah, yeah.
But because we had this relationship, and then we may have even been engaged at this point, we were like, we're doing our own separate things. Like she sang on the Golden Age thing. That was fun. We're doing this Subway stuff to make some money, but ultimately our music careers are going to be separate projects. There's no way we're going to live together, be in a relationship, and have a band together. Can't happen. It'll destroy us. Impossible. But somehow, some way, we just started to bring original songs to the Subway, work them out, and go, oh, okay. And we started playing as Billy and the letter N Gabby. And met and doing like tours like this. And short tours. And realizing, all right, New York, we're living way away from people. Now we were married and we're living in this tiny apartment, and just a tough existence, making no money. I'm paying for things with I'm bringing quarters to the cafe or the falafel shop, 2 months behind on rent minimum, working all these stupid jobs, drowning, in the version of Brooklyn we were in.
Yeah.
And we started to think, oh, well, let's do this Billy and Gabby shtick, but why don't we go to like Rhode Island and like play those like bars that we see the people on Facebook saying that I said I would never do that. I'll never be like a cover artist ever. Let's do it. Like, let's charge money and let's just try it. And it won't be so painful because we're doing these like classic country covers, and there's like a big wink and a smirk to it as well. And so we started doing that, coming up to Rhode Island on the weekends, playing bars, making more money in that weekend than we would make in Brooklyn at that point in time.
Yeah.
And started to develop the infrastructure for a New York to Rhode Island pipeline that included Connecticut, and through this money-making process of playing, but also singing together.
Do you remember what bars you were playing or how you even got into them? Like, was it did you still have some connections up here?
I still had some connections, but we were playing in New Haven at Cafe 9. And I saw a Rhode Island license plate out there, and these guys were playing Frisbee. And I was like, yo, what's up, guys? You guys from Providence? And they're like, no, we're from Newport. I was like, Newport? Really? And for me, Newport, I'd go to the festivals, and like my cousin would take me to like the Tall Ships or something when I was a little kid, school field trip to the mansions, but never saw it as a cultural mecca. Mm-hmm. And I met the band that was playing was Castle, but principally Dave Passafume.
Oh yeah. And from Mickey Woods and
Icky Woods, exactly.
Yeah.
And met him on the street, and he was like, "Oh yeah. We're, you guys just you guys come up and we'll set you up at the gas lamp and probably get you guys like 500 or at least 300 to play 180 when you're up here." And so we started opening up for Castle.
Yeah.
And during those shows, we were like, well, let's do the originals. Why not? We're here playing now. It's legitimate. We're like, we have a guaranteed pay. So who cares if we play? Let's just do the originals.
Yeah. And this is as Billy and Gabby.
As like Billy and Gabby.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. And now we're plugged into Rhode Island, falling in love with Newport, realizing that there's this incredible music scene and art scene there, especially around Broadway.
Yeah.
And we went back to New York one day, and we were like, all right, let's just do it. Let's do a band. And we brought in Keith Robinson, my drummer from Bartholomew, and my drummer today as well, and presented him with a bunch of songs. And we made that first Silverteeth EP. Yeah. Came up with a name at Chris Knott's mom's wedding, actually. We're like debating like name options. And it actually came from, in a lot of ways, it came from an interest in a wonderful song called Sea of Teeth by Sparkle Horse. That was kind of the So we drew on that song that we both loved. Now we're, like I said, we're married. We start this band, and it kind of worked. We got a lot of great press from it, and we came up to Rhode Island for a show. It was called Leisure Fest. Dave Passafume put it on in a diner right before Thanksgiving, 2015. And at this point, I'm depressed. New York's expensive. All my friends have moved. Things aren't going in the way they need to. Mm-hmm. Played Leisure Fest with all these great Newport and Providence bands, and I went out in the street, and I was super emotional. I was like, "We're moving here. Like, let's do it. I'll go to the 8. Let's find a place now." And we have to move to Newport. That's where it's happening. Yeah. And so Silverteeth, very early on, right after recording our record, moved up to Newport and kind of established ourselves there. Brought in Tom Berglund, a local drummer, to work with us, and started living in Newport and touring based out of there. And what an experience, and this little city that I love so much, and that I'm sad to see is also gentrifying and being kind of destroyed by Airbnb and other very greedy operations. But it was this magical time, sort of a Diet Coke version of what I experienced at the Lofts in Brooklyn.
I forgot it. Just how far the skyline seems. These enigmatic pieces of me, they all make the language of the world. They all make the language of the world. Moving parts, a well within my mind. All eyes on us.
Yeah, I mean, where else were you playing when you kind of were there? When you were living there.
Well, we played Aurora. We started to play the Columbus, getting a lot of Columbus theater stuff. We were playing Parlor, Poor Judgment quite a bit. The Ocean Mist.
Parlor in Newport, correct?
Parlor in Newport, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what a name. I mean, come on. Somebody should have flipped a coin there. Let's go. Yeah. or just give it to Providence. But I mean, come on. But, we started to tour. We had great relationships in Burlington, so we could go up and play a couple of shows and crash this great band, Clever Girls, up there.
Cool.
Boston, the Magnolia Loft in Somerville, eventually City Winery, and the Middle East downstairs. And then in New York, things started to build. Knitting Factory, Bowery Presents at Mercury Lounge, Shea Stadium. By being based in Newport, we actually became more successful in New York than we could have possibly been by being there, because we would take the trip in multiple times a month, put the posters up, staple them up, tape them up, meet people.
Yep.
Hustle, go on the subway, busk on the subway, and then do these fairly big shows that we were able to get because of the press we were getting for our first record. So
yeah. Who was doing press for you then? Were you doing your own PR?
We're doing our own PR. I learned, I learned so much about that I'd always done that. I'd always done my own PR. Everything was DIY. Mm-hmm. I've put up thousands of posters all over Brooklyn, thousands of stickers, mailed out hundreds and hundreds of CDs. But during Silverteeth, Gabriella and I worked as a team. Mm-hmm. And when we put the record out, we literally set up a desk across from each other and just went to town for like a week, 10-hour days, 12-hour days at times. Email this person, email that person. Okay, this magazine, this booking agent, this kid on Facebook that says he's got a band in Portland, Maine, whatever it was, just 1,000 miles an hour, doing it that way. And that's something that has obviously fed into the whole Bartholomewtown operation.
Yeah, just getting it done,
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, with that, you've got that 3-song EP that is, it's fantastic. some other singles, the Armin Killers. You have a video for that, which is super rad. People should check that out. And then you did a recording at the Columbus for Shoes.
Yep.
That was with Jeff and Ben, correct? From
that was, yeah, exactly, with those guys. And Colleen Hennessy, formerly of Commas, was the director of photography for that video. She also is the director of photography now and has been for the last decade for the Newport Folk and Jazz Festivals.
Oh, right.
And my guy, Chris Knott, playing harp and keyboard on those Columbus sessions there as well. So, and of course, then, you feel like you're like the Columbus thing, and that's all I'm sure that could be a whole nother podcast, like in and of itself, is like the Columbus moment in Rhode Island, that moment with the low anthem. And, I know that there's been negative things that have come out of there of recent, and in terms of like misbehavior or gross misconduct by certain people. I get that. You look at, think about Joe Fletcher and those guys, but at the time they had a magnet around them. They had an aura that suggested this is where you need to be. If you're a part of New England's music community, this is the center of it.
Yeah.
And so to get to a point where we're making videos there, I was like, oh, this is pretty freaking awesome. Here we are. We're like, we're in a place that I feel excited about.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a magical place. And I think it was a Bob Dylan tribute night that they were having there that Gabrielle and I came up from New York to go to. And it was standing room only by the time we drove up, and we're like, and you just felt that energy. And it was similar to that Leisure Fest in Newport where, I was like, this is missing from New York right now. And we know what this is because we've had it through our DIY McKibben Street period. We know what this connection feels like. We know what this feeling is. It's a magical thing. It's not permanent. And Tom and Sean are amazing. And I hope that when we reopen, I think they're gonna be able to do some incredible things. But it was just like, and being able to perform there a number of times, headlining our own shows there. I look back on those shows with like a lot of amazement, because it is, like you say, it's just, how is this space available to do what we're all doing in this period in time, where that thing could be some, Joe Paolino could buy that thing and turn it into like the Lofts at the Columbus Theater, Columbo, Columbo's, Lofts. And By the way, that thing has 1,492 seats. Isn't that interesting? The Columbus.
Oh, does it? I did not know that.
I found that out. It's something else. I wonder if they'll change the name. I've always wondered that, like, with all the big push and stuff, is that going to happen? I know I always wonder that. And I don't know that they should either. I'm not sure. Like, does it create more debate to have it there? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't, really put too much into that particular, your piece of it, but I mean, it is definitely something to think about. So,
right.
But, you have a new EP coming out June 11th, Bats EP. Can you talk about that record and, a little bit of the process of putting that together? Was it kind of done over COVID, or was it something prior to that? And, who's playing on it? I know that you've done some other solo songs where it's like you're doing everything from performing and producing and recording and everything like that. But, what went into this particular EP?
Yeah. So things changed a lot in, I guess, 2017 or so, when Gabriella got accepted to RISD to paint, Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay.
And we kept the band going. I started Bartholomewtown around that time, and we kept the band going. We did a lot of amazing shows, and it was an advantage to be plugged into the RISD community at that point. A lot of great shows at RISD. But it got to a point where we made our second record. Things did not go well at all. We worked with an amazing mixer, John Aiello, who's done everything from Kurt Weill and Sonic Youth, Yola Tango, Dino, Dinosaur Jr., and just didn't come out how we wanted it to. And I got physically sick during the process. And that was, in a lot of ways, that was sort of the end of the modern iteration of Silverteeth. She and I decided at some point that let's try just doing our own things, which she's working on something right now. And from what I've heard, it's really cool. Excited about it. And maybe, I could see us coming back together and doing something after this period. And I don't know what it would sound like or be like, or who would play with us, but yeah, so I kind of realized that my music career, quote unquote, was in my own hands about a year or two ago, I guess. Then the pandemic hit, and I had still written songs, still was picking up my guitar, even through the whole Bartholomewtown world that I was now immersed in.
Yeah.
But right at the beginning of the pandemic, I don't think I touched my guitar from March until like the end of July. I was totally removed from music, and still sparingly over the course of the summer last year, and even sparingly in the fall. But then at some point I started to work on songs again, and I started to write songs. I remember it was snowing out when I wrote 2 of the songs that are on the Bats EP. And I was like, okay, there's something here. There's something fresh. There's still something to say. It harkens back to my period in the cafes, and that sounds like something like, here's Bob Dylan at the cafes or whatever. It's like, sounds so stupid, but certainly, the DIY venues, I'll say, including this cafe, Potion Cafe, and it harkened back to something there. And I was writing and I understood recording it, but every attempt to home record in the past had been a total failure for me. It just didn't work. Don't have the gear, the patience to mix. Some truck backs up right when you get the magical take, the vocal take. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Something happens. So I didn't really want to do it, but I realized that, well, what happened? What do I have to lose? Let me just try to do a new system in which I do 3 songs at a time. I do them on my own. I record. They get the click track. Record in my podcast space here in Providence, do an acoustic guitar. I mock up a drum idea on my electronic drums, send it to Keith Robinson in Brooklyn. He records the drums, sends it back to me. I record electric guitars and keyboards and vocals, email it to Chris Knott in Pawtucket. He adds a bass, send it back to me. I add some more harmonies, megaphone vocals, so on and so forth. And then I sent it to Brad Krieger at Big Nice Studio to mix it. And literally like 4 hours later, he called me. He was like, yeah, this thing was pretty much already mixed. It kind of mixed itself. It's done. It's like, here we go. It was easy, and so I've developed this system, and I love the way this record sounds. I think it's my favorite sounding record I've ever done. And you can hear that just enough of a home vibe and just enough vulnerability, but it also, because it kind of got boosted at Big Nice, it holds up. And that's really exciting. It's a space that I finally found. It's a highly budget friendly way of doing things. And so I foresee making recorded music in this format for at least the next year or two before, unless, look, if someone comes along and is like, the old story, like the agent pops out of the alleyway. Hey kid, I got, I'm going to get, Frank Sinatra's there with him for some reason.
What do you do in the studio? Stat,
exactly right.
You've got the perfect band for you. Just
got a limo picking me up. Exactly. Short of that happening, I'll probably just keep doing this. And something that podcasting taught me about music. I was in Brazil last year, the year before, not last year, obviously during the pandemic. And I'd been several times, but I was outside, like, it was like raining. I was like having a smoke or something. I was like, what if I do music like podcasting? Like, don't take each song, like it matters. And when you're in the zone, yes, this is the most important thing in the world. You want it to sound as great as possible. You want the interview to be as great as possible. Get it to as many people as possible. But then you move on to the next episode, and that episode's there for people. What if I do music like that? Instead of being like, all right, we've got these 3 Silverteeth songs. This is it for the next year, and we're going to push it to everywhere. What if music was like, on to the next one? And it has released a tremendous amount of stress and pressure that I have felt for my entire music career, of like being like, you have to deliver right now. This is it. if you don't do it, you're a failure and you wasted a ton of money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what you're saying, it's just there's all these new opportunities and breaking away from the typical cycle that, I mean, yeah, like the vastness of what can be done. And I mean, obviously what comes to mind is probably the most popular one is the Postal Service, where, you know, they're just able to like, well, we don't actually need to even be in the same room, and we can just create this. And obviously with digital technology and, you know, services that are out there, like it doesn't even take that much to get music up there. And it's probably even going to be more beneficial to you, in this like streaming digital world where they're looking for just new things and you know, what else is like the next piece that's up there and new info, you know, new things, rather than just like, oh, you've got just a couple of songs that have been kind of static there for a year or so, you know? So,
yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, it also helps that certainly Keith Robinson and I played together in Bartholomew, and then he was the original drummer of Silverteeth, and our you know, certainly our best recorded work was with him. It's not a dig at Tom Berglund, just how, you know, the process, we had a tough process recording the second couple of efforts, but he and I, you know, known each other, and we know each other's instincts. Chris not, I mean, there's, you know, the guy and I've been playing music together for 20 years. And so when I send him a track, it's like, well, he knows what is a Bill song call for on bass, just like, you know, so there's this extra level of where, I miss the hangout and they're like, okay, cool guys, you ready to go? Like do the music now? Like, okay, let's just like, guys, want to hang out a little more. Okay, cool. Like I miss that part of it, but the productivity wise, you know, it took me about 3 or 4 weeks to do this record, and and a record EP, and I'm excited about it. It's I'm happy, you know, like I'm excited to be doing this podcast very much so, and anything that comes out of this is great. But I'm really proud of the music. I like to listen to it, and I like to play it for people, because the goal isn't to write a hit. You know, I've had some songs that have gotten placed in the past, and all of those have come through like random, some guy saw me at Rockwood Music Hall in New York and his brother is making a horror movie, or whatever. So I've had songs in film, I've had songs on like MTV shows and stuff like that, and the checks are nice when they come in, you know, of course, like you feel like, yes, I am a professional musician. Like I am a real songwriter. Like, no one can take it away from me. But then it's like, well, but when do you drive around and listen to those songs? Like, have you ever like raced in like Walter White, like pulling out of a scene in Breaking Bad to like someone's house to like say, yo, check it out, this sounds awesome. And we did it ourselves without spending a penny on recording. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why I'm so excited about Bats, is because it opens up this new door to me that I think will allow me to just like create without that extra stress and burden of being like, this is the moment and I have to step up. I want people to love it, but if they don't, it doesn't. Like if Motif magazine writes, you know, Bill Bartholomew's new EP Bats absolutely sucks, period. And they just publish that. Okay. I definitely don't care, you know? Yeah.
Well, you were kind enough to share with me to preview it, and no, man, it's solid. I mean, personally, I love the song a lot. To be free for, man, like that, it's catchy, man, and like it's only been like a day since I've like heard this record, and that song is in my head, and I mean, I love what you're doing. I mean, and I would say that, if anyone's been a fan of what you've done, heard your solo stuff, heard Silverteeth, it's not this like incredible departure that someone's going to say like, what the hell is Bill doing with this? You know, like it sounds like what you would write, but there does seem like there's a little bit more freedom with it. There's a lot of different vocal effects, a lot of layering of vocals, using your voice as an instrument, or to add different dynamics, like how you sing. So not even like the effects, but just like it seems like how you sing, you know, it just seems authentic to who you are as an artist. So
I appreciate that a lot, and I've collected, being a big Mike Patton fan in high school. That was a huge thing for me. And I never really did it until, in Acid Rain Revival at the very beginning, I had a little bullhorn, and I would, some girl would be in the crowd at the talent show, and I'd jump off the stage and sing the song into the megaphone into her face, or whatever. But actually using those as a tool, I use a physical Radio Shack megaphone and a harmonica mic plugged into a delay pedal, plus a regular mic. So I'll use that on stage as well going forward. So I have these 3 vocal setups, and it is exactly that. It's like, the voice can be an instrument in and of itself that doesn't, you don't have to, and also doing different voicing, singing in falsetto or in these like characters. And some of the new stuff I'm going to put out has more of that like character voice, almost like I'm doing an impression while singing. So I appreciate that a lot, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, was it challenging though, like in this new, like endless production kind of phase, like, was it difficult to know how many tracks to put on this, or how much to, like, should you add another guitar? Should there be another keyboard part to this? Because you can, and there isn't. Because it is a different thing when you're in the studio and there's a clock that you're punching, or there's, certain deadlines. You're like, oh no, this will be fine. And it could go the other way as well. Like, I wish I could have added more of this stuff, but was that a challenge for you, or did you feel that it kind of hit in the right spot?
I think it mostly came together. It helped that I had booked and paid for the mixing dates before I laid down a track. I think I started tracking like March 29th. And right before I did, I called Brad at Big Nice and was like, hey, what do you have at the beginning of May? And he was like, May 4th and 5th sound good? I was like, okay, I'm Venmoing you now. So it's done. You have to have the stems printed. This record has to be done and in Brad's inbox 10 o'clock in the morning by that date.
Yeah.
And it's going to take X number of days for the drums to get done. And Chris Knott's going to need time for the bass. So I really only had probably 2 weeks of recording time. And I have developed, I think, a very efficient creative process through the other stuff I've been doing now, in terms of knowing, like, okay, you're in Pro Tools. Yes, don't be lazy, but let's do 3 vocal takes, 3 acoustic guitar takes, 3 electric guitar takes, hit the keyboard in MIDI and fix it after. And then let's call it a day, because we've got to go do this other thing for the PBS show or something. So working in that way and doing limited takes and comping on as I was going along, and just building note by note, focusing rather than on adding new tracks, instead adding to an existing track. Like, oh, that lyric sucks. I could do that. That doesn't make any sense. That needs to be improved. Okay, well, what should it be? Let me think about that today. And then tomorrow at 10:15, I've gone till 11. And during that time, I'm going to add this new lyric. So it was more of that. The original tracks were very quick to come, because I kind of just plotted it out as I wanted to sound basically like a guy with an acoustic, an electric player, a drummer and a bass, and a little bit of keyboards and ambient guitar. But no, I think I could have gone overboard if I hadn't booked with Brad. And
that's smart. Yeah.
Here comes, I've got the metal bell xylophone. All of a sudden that's on there, some 50 claps and stuff. And it's like,
yeah. But yeah, you were talking about, you've got, some of this gear that you brought into this recording for your performance, and you've got a show June 18th at dusk.
Yes.
With Bert and Harley and Ziggy Nardust. So, can you talk about, shout out that show? What can people expect if they come and see you?
Well, certainly similarly to booking the mixing dates, I also booked basically a release party. I was like, okay, we're also not going to fool around and send this to, we're not going to shop it around. We're just going to, as soon as they got the masters, we'll get them up on the back end so they can be released on Spotify, and we'll just go. Get Mark Michelson to make a poster and see you later. This will be, I love the group. It's Chris Knott on bass and Dylan Harley of a number of projects. Thursday night, first Thursdays of the Columbus, he had his own variety show, WHEM. He was in the Horseside Men. He's a great solo artist in and of himself. He's got this new gypsy jazz group that's going to close out the show. amazing drummer. So he's playing drums. It's trio. I play electric guitar mostly, use the 3 different vocal sounds. And we're going to, I think it's going to be pretty smoking. Like to borrow like something you'd hear at a bar right there. You know? Those guys are smoking
show, man.
Smoking show. That's right. But I think that's what it is. It's like really hitting the tunes, new stuff, great stuff that's not been recorded, a little bit of Silverteeth songs. I'm really psyched about that. I think that show is going to be a lot of fun. And then Ziggy, drummer of the Z Boys, just an all around mega talent. Somebody I've even taken drum lessons from in different intervals, and so he's going to open it up and outdoors at dusk in the backyard. Should be great. Cool. I'm so psyched to be back. You know, I didn't want to push it, you know, with COVID, taking it I took it so seriously, and the thought of doing a show didn't seem possible in January or February. Yeah. And I think we've done a great job roll out here. And just overall, we can totally do an outdoor show in the middle of June at this point. Like that to me feels like that's safe. And for that, I'm extremely grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, where can people check out your music, or where will Bats be available?
Yeah. Spotify, Apple Music. It's, it'll be up there and Bandcamp, all BillBartholomew.bandcamp.com, or just search on Spotify. And all over social media, Twitter and Instagram at Bill Bartholomew, or on Facebook. It's all at Bill Bartholomew on platforms. And yeah, I'm looking forward to just dropping that Spotify link. Just like, here it is. Ta-da. You know, it's like I'm not gonna go nuts. Like you will not get a personal message from me in your Facebook inbox, you know, or anything like that. Like I'm not gonna spam people, but I'm just gonna drop it and see what happens.
Yeah,
just like the podcast.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I appreciate you doing this interview to promote that. So it means a lot. But is there anything that I may have missed that you wanted to bring up with your career?
That's a pretty incredible overview. You know, the future's unknown. I don't know what's going to happen with Silverteeth. You know, Gabriella is going to Yale to paint for her master's degree, starting in a 2-year program in September. And the nimbleness of being a solo artist is very good with everything else I've got going on with Bartholomewtown and PBS and even WPRO. Yeah. So I could see that staying, but I don't know what's going to happen. You know, I don't, we might have another Silverteeth run in us, and I missed that moment. You know, as great as being a solo artist is for a lot of reasons, there's nothing like being in a band. You know, that's those are relationships that I think if you played like college basketball, or if you served in the Marines or something like that, not to draw a comparison, you can rank them how you choose, but you form bonds there.
Absolutely,
that are the hardest breakups in my life. Without question, having had relationships with partners that exceeded 5 years now on 3 occasions, and having other very close partners in my intimate partners, the hardest breakups have always been with band members, some of which I'm not over yet, you know, and I don't know that I'll ever be. I try to think about those people and what we went through. And not dwell on what could have been, or this move or that move or whatever it was. But, you know, bands are such a magical thing and so underappreciated, because, you know, I once heard Jim Leland, the Major League Baseball manager, in an interview, like someone like questioned like his move or something like that when he was managing the Tigers about you should have brought this guy in as a starting pitcher. Yeah. And he said, you have no idea how difficult it is to win a major league game. Like you could never do it. Whoever you are, you could never do it. The same is true for bands. You have no idea, unless you've been in a band, you have no idea how hard it is to go from the point of an idea to a record, a show, or even more so a brand. And you know that. But it's underappreciated by a lot of people. A lot of people, when you hear, oh, you're a musician, they think, oh, you're just like doing drugs and like laying around all day and like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's a show time yet, man. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it is the hardest work I've ever done in my life. And the most important relationships have come out of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you share that. And yeah, just trying to shed a little bit of light. Yeah. I can completely identify where it's a lot of work, and a lot of the discussions that I have had with people is that there is that thing that you can't really put a finger on of what makes a musician do this type of stuff, because it doesn't make any logical sense. As I'm broke, sleeping in the back of a van in the middle of the country, and then eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, and hoping that we can sell enough CDs just to get enough gas to get to the next show. But then getting back, I lived with Anthony from Barn Burning for a while, and we had this big map. We'd get back and we just start looking at the map and start booking another tour, because we knew we'd have to just get back at it. And we're like, well, it's going to take another couple months before we go. So we're, when we get back from the spring tour, we're booking like the late summer, fall tour, and just doing that, and then playing shows around town. And it's just, there's just a lot that goes into it. And I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. It's what we've, I guess, in a way kind of signed up for, but it can be tough when the person that isn't a musician doesn't, not that they need to give that much respect or that much time, but when it seems that it's not even valued anymore, that they'll take it for the enjoyment, and that's good. And I like that beat or whatever. But this past year, it really kind of put a spotlight on that of like what people do for entertainment, and the lack of live music, and so hopefully some of that stuff can kind of shift a little bit. But yeah, it's an incredible experience. I'm with you. It was of just having these deep bonds with people that I've toured with and played in bands with, and yeah, I mean, I love everyone that I've played with, and yeah, it's just something that can't be taken away. I guess that's the key thing. So
that's right. It's one of those things that's definitely written in the stars, and the people you meet along the way too. I've lost a lot of friends along the way, especially in Brooklyn and even here in Rhode Island, whether it's from suicide, drugs, COVID, but music and those experiences, it's very cheesy to say, well, it lives on or whatever. It does. It's like the elixir of life that kind of keeps me moving in a lot of ways, are these people that you connect with. And it's very hard to explain that. And it's very hard for people to understand that and appreciate it if they're on the outside, unless it's a similar thing in their life. Maybe their group of teachers that they work with, they have this bond or so, whatever it is. But yeah, I hope that we see a reignition of the appreciation for live entertainment, which predates the record industry by millennia, right? It goes it's so far back. Like this whole thing we're a part of is just a flash, and entertainment's been there since the get-go. So
but I think that's a good segue to the final question that I always ask. Bill, what would you say is your greatest accomplishment tied to music up to this point?
That I am 36 and I'm living in a warehouse building in Providence, surrounded by microphones, computers, guitars, and through music and media, I don't have a job that I hate, and I'm no longer destitute, like in poverty, and I see a pathway forward to continue to do it and grow. When everybody told me, go to law school, do this, do that, wear these clothes, don't talk when the teacher's talking, don't make jokes, don't push back against the bullies, don't toe the line, and to live a life that I'm not towing the line still, and I'm getting away with it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. but at the same time, I'm just going to roll with it and keep going forward.
Yeah. Well, keep doing it, Bill, man. You're such a, I don't know. I look up to you a lot, man. And you're just a force here in Rhode Island, with what you're doing, obviously musically, but just, what you're doing just in a broader sense as well, that just spans beyond that. Truly appreciate what you're doing. And, I appreciate you taking some time to let everyone know like a little bit of your history and your story to this point. So thanks, Bill.
Thank you, James. And thanks for what you do as well. It's so critical. And with the Hall of Fame, with your music, it's just so important. And good Lord, imagine a world where this stuff wasn't acknowledged in a way that you're doing it. And the living room itself, I think about that venue, and you start there, you call up, Randy books you a Tuesday at 7:00, and the next thing you know, he gives you a shot to open up for Psychedelic Breakfast on a Friday night, and then you're headlining. And that facility and what that world meant to me, to keep that specific legacy alive of Randy Hine is just also really, really magical, and I'm very thankful you are.
Well, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sleepy eyes and gasoline, running down a random dream. Try to make the best of things. Hope to God you're gonna ring. Lot of beat 3-4, lot of beat 3-4. There's a lot of beat 3-4. Lot of beat 3-4, hypnotized and running wild, hanging on an inner child. Caught yourself and it brought you back. Hobo on a railroad track. Lot of beat 3-4, lot of beat 3-4. Beat 3-4, lot of beat 3-4. There's a lot of beat 3-4, lot of beat 3-4. There's a lot of beat 3-4, lot of beat 3-4. Some might fight, it's their right. Others, they find the light. It's their right. Others, they find the light.